Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Rewriting the Foundations. I'm your host, Macy Miranda, and if you're joining us back from last week's episode, or the episode, I introduced the COVID-19 pandemic and its broad spectrum of its impacts on a larger scale, not just for students, but as well as society as a whole, and how that impacted how we're learning and functioning today. So from that episode, I kind of gathered my information and materials from my personal experiences and what I've seen in schools, as well as talking with other students and teachers. And I'm going to use that. That's kind of like the foundation for this episode is the COVID-19 pandemic. I want to introduce how I even came up with this topic, at least for this episode. And I'm sure part of me is why am I even recording this? Because really it's to the average Joe, it seems kind of like it's cringe. And it's like, oh, you're kind of into that stuff. Why would you share that with anyone who has access to this file or recording? But at the same time, it's it is something that I enjoy, and it is something that other people enjoy. Millions of people around the globe enjoy, and they find a sense of self in doing. And by that, I mean fanfiction. Yes, I'm sure you can tell from the episode title, I am a fan of the fiction, as many other people are. But primarily where I'm getting this episode from is my personal experiences with how you really, at least at the end of middle school and as a teen, are kind of introduced into fan fiction and the whole creative writing spectrum in its entirety. And I had a theory when I first originally came up with this podcast, because at first I was really just going to talk about why and how students, especially younger students, are impacted and affected because of COVID, and how the learning spectrum has completely changed from before COVID to after COVID, the implications of how everything transpired and whatnot. But then some of me said, well, wait a minute. Don't you read and write creative stories and you publish them? Do you write fan fiction? You read the fan fiction. You're seeing the creative liberties that comes with that. And I'm like, yes, I do. So then I had a theory. Well, if these kids aren't falling down the same funnel as you or myself or some of my friends have, then they're not getting the same learning and reading experiences that we had access to, or we still have access to generally. But what I mean is a sense of we grabbed it and held on, and we still are holding steadfast to it. And these kids, by not reading or writing fan fiction, have stunted their ability to have an expanded taste in literature and English and reading and writing and all that. And so my question was, is there any information to where the exposure of reading and writing fan fiction directly correlates to the literacy level for young teens and young adults in Gen Z and those of the generation after Gen Z? And it really stood with me for a second. I was like, theoretically, this makes sense that there is a correlation, but when I tried researching anything, literally I went on to Google, I went on to Gemini, I went to Safari, I went to all the places, and I'm like, is there actual data correlating this? And there was nothing. And I'm like, okay, well then how am I going to write this episode? How am I going to script this? I don't have a script for this episode, really. So this is a more, here's what I'm laying out and here's the thoughts I have on it. Do with that what you will. And my thoughts still stand by that. I do believe that the funnel between end of middle school into high school and finding out fan fiction was a thing and creative writing was a thing and having that creative liberty directly impacted my vocabulary, my descriptive writing skills, my scenery, the characterization, the emotion behind the writing, the meaning, what I want to try to get the characters to invoke, what I want the audience to pull away from it, why dialogue is important, the setting, the scenes, the theme, all of it. I feel like all of that has been boosted because we have access to reading and writing fan fiction. Is that a hot take? I don't know. But that's what I want to believe. And for those listeners who aren't aware what fan fiction is or creative writing is, let me break it down for you in an introductory level. Fan fiction is the process of a person becoming obsessed with a show, a book, a movie, whatever you want to call it, a series. As long as it is the context of this is a fandom a collective group of people who like and enjoy the whole spec and spiel. That's what they enjoy, and that is a fandom. So people becoming enthralled with these shows, these books, even real life people. You have your football, you have your music idols, even all those have fandoms, and becoming enthralled with them. You're like put into a hypothetical scenario of, I love this so much that I want to make my own storyline with it. I love these characters so much that I want to include them in it. And so it's really the implementation of, here's how the original storyline went, but I didn't like it, or I felt like it needed more, or I was left unsatisfied, or I feel like there could be so much more expanding on what the show or pop star or movie or book had given me, but I feel like it could grow so much more. And that idea that any fan has grows into this storyline. And they're like, okay, well, I have a headcanon. A headcanon is something that a person can kind of think about what a person from anything could do or feel like it's happened, but isn't necessarily all true. That's why it's a headcanon. It's canon in your head to the story. And canon means like it's real, it's 100% there. The canon is the real. So if it's a headcanon, it's a fake real scenario that a person can believe about someone real or a character that exists. And that idea and that concept of, I have this idea that I want to bring to life because I feel like other people would enjoy my thought process and my take on what could have happened. I find enjoyment out of that. And that is really just the basis of fanfiction, is I find enjoyment out of the thing that I made up in my head about these characters or these people because I liked the thought of it. And it was nice. It was cute. It was all these concepts of the what if scenarios, this shouldn't have happened. It should have ended this way. That's where the creative liberty really flows for a person. And in doing so, the collective amount of fans between the millions of areas that they have at their disposal, whether it be from really old films, really old books, really new stuff, or things that are so niche that there's only 5 people that really like it, it's still considered a fandom and people are still enjoy it. So you have that creative liberty. And that's what I really enjoy, is that because I have the opportunity to put something of my time worth into something that I know will be there for me. I guess it's kind of like therapeutic in a way, typing out what these characters want to do in this story, in the storyline, how they interact with each other, how the dialogue is, what is the scene, how are they feeling, what emotions do I want to draw for the audience when I write these characters. Are they sad? Are they depressed? Are they going through a joyful time in their life? Are they trying to find the meaning of their career? Are they trying to find something new, a pinnacle that they can strive to, where they can become passionate about? And then is there a bump in the road that steers them away, that completely changes their perspective, that, the secret that gets revealed? Is there romance? Is there death? Is there anguish? Is there, there's all these possibilities that you have as a reader and a writer. It's the unknown, but it's known because it is your thought process that goes into creating these pieces for not only yourself, but for millions of other people who are fans of these different media outlets. And that's what I really enjoy about it. So now circling back to my reintroduction about what I talked about last episode with COVID-19, is that I experienced COVID in a very weird spot. Well, I feel like we all collectively experienced COVID in a weird spot. You have the online classes that we had to take. No one did that. No one has ever done that unless it's like adult learning, like graduate level online classes to get a graduate's degree or bachelor's or whatever. But that's like after high school, after middle school, like way after. And so like no one really thought a mind to it. But now you have all these kids who are put on Zoom and have nothing else to do but pay attention and get the credit of, oh yeah, I was there this day. And then it's a pass fail because they literally had to rework the entire grading system to comprehend this phenomenon that was going on in the world. Isn't that crazy? And I don't know about you, but before COVID happened, I was put in a CMS school. And I feel like my experience with school has been generally positive compared to other people who have been funneled into different school systems, where I had the availability and I had the opportunity to go to these really good schools because of my parents and because of the social economical status that I had and because what my parents believed in and all these things. So having the opportunity to go to a private school between grades K through 5, I was really lucky because in that school where I went to, they taught things a grade before. So I was getting 6th grade stuff in 5th grade. And I feel like that, as well as the fact that it just had really good community and background and funding, drastically improved the way I was learning and how I perceived school to be. So to go from a private institution to then having to transfer and go to a public, Charlotte Mecklenburg school, it was a tough change regardless of the people that I had to leave behind and, the whole experience of it's a clean slate. Nobody knows who I am and I have to redo the things that I've had constant with me for the past 5 years because all my friends are gone type of thing. But you had to really get adjusted to what the difference in learning looked like compared to a private school. And I couldn't find myself to be enthralled and engaged in classes, especially in like math and English language arts. Not that I had a huge dislike for English. I loved English. It's just the assignments I found to be almost like busy work, and I kind of shrugged them to the side and being like, I don't feel like I'm putting my energy towards something that would really showcase what kind of learner I was or how I perceived the content, if that makes sense. And I'm bringing this up because it relates to how I got introduced to fanfiction. I'm sure many of you have heard the stories of Percy Jackson. Rick Riordan, I'm sure you've heard his name around many times, especially with the new Disney Plus series. But reading that book as a 6th grader in my ELA class and then having this, booklet to go along with it to answer questions in this book that I just found silly answers to because I thought, oh yeah, well technically it answers this prompt, but it wasn't descriptive. It wasn't engaging. I was simply just shoving it to the side because I wanted to be done with the class and move on with my day. I was like, school, it's repetitive. Sure, you have your semesters and they flip and they flop, but the classes that I went to every day, it just like, I wasn't getting the things that I felt like I should be getting out of them. And that's no diss to any of my teachers that taught me during those times because I loved those teachers. I specifically remember I loved science class. I loved that teacher. I loved how she did everything and it was great. And I loved my ELA teacher because I felt like I could have genuine conversations with her and the class was engaging and whatnot. But I just felt like the work itself was like the main factor that I couldn't get the drive for. And so then the content itself in that one particular ELA class, that book and, the literature of that, I really became enthralled with the characters and the storytelling. And of course, as every person does, once you like something and you get to know it and familiarize yourself with it, you become a fan, which I did become. And during that time, I was like, okay, I've read Percy Jackson and The Lightning Thief. I know that baseline. It's really popular. A bunch of people also are familiar with it because it has so many similarities between everyday, kids with ADHD, kids with dyslexia, all these learning disabilities. Not that I have any not that I have any that I'm aware of, but it's just that as a spectrum, it revolves around the kids and how they're also going through school as well, but they're dealing with all these problems in the storyline and these plot lines. But I also became so enthralled with it because I was a history nerd and I loved history. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans. Oh my gosh, it's so fun to talk about and see how Rick gave these gods a persona, an attitude, and energy to them to act like a normal person would. And I was like, this is fun. This is good. And I like it. So by the end of 6th grade, when we had to then stop throughout halfway through the year and go virtual, I was simply just put on the couch every day with my Chromebook open on my lap on the edge of the couch, just reading, looking up all these different things for Percy Jackson, because at that point I hadn't read all the other books. And so I'm like, oh, I go on YouTube, I search up audio books of people reading the book out loud. I'm like, okay, let me see what they say and how they like kind of perceive the characters' attitudes, how they talk. Some people do the voices when they do audiobooks and like different characters, which I'm sure if you've listened to like any Harry Potter audiobooks, they do that all the time. And I was like, okay, well, I stumbled upon this YouTube video collection. And it was of this woman, and she had freeze framed just a photo of like, the chapter titles and the number episode it was. But it was an original story with these characters. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. And so I click on it and I'm just listening to her read the story. And I'm like, whoa. It was simply a retelling of the events in the Battle of Olympus. If you know Percy Jackson, you know that book. In the Battle of Olympus, but from Annabeth's point of view, not Percy's. Annabeth's point of view. And I was like, that perspective change, that flip is something that you originally don't think about in the original Percy Jackson book until later when Rick changes perspectives of the characters each chapter, when he introduces the Roman camps and all that stuff, when it's more than one person in different times in the story. And I was like, this is something I really enjoy, seeing what creative liberties people can write and then put on any media outlet to then showcase what they believe happened for this character at this point in time. And I found myself going down a wormhole, almost a rabbit hole. That was my introduction into fanfiction, was Percy Jackson and that spiral of finding all these original items. So then I go from finding videos to finding websites online where people have literally published their own writing. And I was like, people really do this and you can do it for free. And so I was like, wow, this is great. I have an access to unlimited versions of a story that I like with the same characters that I have always liked since reading this book, and it's great and everything. And so in going down this tunnel of these websites and all this stuff, I've come across multiple sites. You have Tumblr, of course, is really popular, especially for more, I'd say, idea boards or inspo boards, as well as just like publishing what the introduction to a story was. They have, the square grid of pictures that kind of sets the mood of their story or their fan fiction or whatever they have. That kind of lets the readers know, hey, here's kind of like the attitude, or here's the energy kind of going into this. If you want to read it, here's a little description and there's a link to wherever that takes you to read the story. And then I've found sites that you would think is the most obvious, fanfiction.net. And fanfiction.net for me was, the most way I can describe it is kind of like the Wikipedia for fanfiction. It's like you have your dictionary. It's kind of in the way where you can filter it through by whatever fandom or show or movie or whatever, and you find that. And it's just a white screen. It's just people's interpretations, and they just post on there and they have their description of the story. And then it's like, how many words does it have? How many chapters type of thing? What characters are there? But it's not the most pretty when it's formatted like that, because it was really standard is what I can say. And then after finding that, I was like, oh, people can post the same thing on multiple websites. So then I discover what Wattpad is. And I'm sure some of you have figured out what Wattpad is and get the memes behind it or something like that. But for those of you who don't know what Wattpad is a website where you can create an account for free and publish any writing for free. And any, I mean, people have published whole books, original works with their idea, with their copyright, with everything onto Wattpad. People have posted fan fiction on Wattpad. People have posted art on Wattpad. People have different genres. You have your romance, you have your horror, you have your academic, you have, you have sports, you have racing, you have this thriller, you have fantasy. All that stuff is on there because people wanted to publish it for people to read and enjoy and see what they can create themselves. What is really cool about Wattpad is that they being the creators and like the website and the whoever makes it, allow so many opportunities to their users. Some of these books started out as an original that someone created on Wattpad and published on Wattpad themselves with their own original concept, storylines, you name it. And then it got noticed by some large print company or who knows what, and now they have physical copies printed on paper selling on Amazon with their original work. Like, do you not understand how life-changing that is for some people? Is that you simply just wanted to create something of yourself with your own take or your own spin or your own plot, your own characters, everything, and put it online, and now you're gaining money and you have a well-known name because of that, simply because you did something forever ago that was free. Like, the potential is astronomical. And Wattpad also has these things called the Watties, which are basically Wattpad's, Oscars or like the New York Times best-selling sticker, but for Wattpad original books or any creations on Wattpad, where people can submit their own works if they fit certain criteria. And that in itself is like, I believe that while Wattpad can seem really cringy for some people, because in exploring Wattpad as a middle schooler, you are subjected to a bunch of new content, which is again both good and bad, because part of you is, I want to see what other people created, and other people created all this well thought out work, and your dictionary, the words that you've used to describe scenes, to describe these characters, are so exaggerated, they're so exemplimentary, they're so well thought out, and you have access to that, and now you're reading this work and you're like, okay, well, what does this word mean? So you're really just finding definitions for new words and adding them to your vocabulary, as well as you're understanding and picking up how characters are being perceived and how the writer is processing what they want in the story to cross over to what the reader is seeing in the story and all that stuff. And you're getting that exchange of literature, which is really like my main pinnacle here, is the students in middle school now who may or may not be introducing themselves into fan fiction and creative writing are not getting that introduction into a more professional, a more thought out, a more well written piece of work than they're used to based on their level of reading or their comprehension level. And so by exploring and going into all these sites, you're finding this exceptional work from who knows where, because it's an anonymous user or a username, but you don't know the real person. It's someone completely around the globe who is writing because they want to write. And you're finding their work, and you are reading the words and the work on their reading level and their comprehension level. And that's really the point I'm trying to preface here, is that the kids who are not doing that and not introducing themselves to fan fiction creative writing, is that they're not getting that introduction into higher level vocabulary, the diction, the themes, the settings, all that jazz about literature and reading and writing compared to their regular class structure content. And so by my exploration and finding these websites, by finding a sense of security almost in the way that people are creating these scenarios in their brain and putting characters to them, whether they're original characters or people throughout celebrity life or book characters or show or movies or whatever, they are reaching new heights. And in reaching those new heights, I have found that, especially looking back on my old work, even in 9th grade and 8th, the school essays, the passages, they don't have to be anything super proficient. I've just saved any writing I have had access to in my school account to my other Gmail accounts and Google Drives, simply because it just is writing. And by looking at the writing that I have produced previously, I'm looking and seeing how I processed the way the words should be used and formulated on the page to transfer over how I want it to sound to a reader. Is it understandable? Is the language I'm using descriptive enough? Does it correlate to the topic I want to try and answer? Or is there a prompt that I feel like it solidifies in the way I'm writing about it? And so I've saved multiple essays or documents of just writing, and it's, it's history writing. It's why does Black Wall Street da-da-da? It's how has the change in industrialization impacted the environment? It's how has the United Nations done all this globally, ABCD, who cares? But it is writing. And I've looked back at all these pieces and I'm like, even for the grade I know that I got on this, I can see how I have grown from it and to it. And I think that's the main point, is that by practicing creative writing and writing in general, is that you just are getting used to it and you're finding words, especially I'm finding words when I am writing, is I'm finding words to automatically come to my head when I'm trying to describe something. And it's sometimes a little creepy and scary because I'm like, I swear I have heard this word before in conversation, in text, in whatever, but I don't know the meaning of it, but it feels like it belongs there. And so I'm reading this sentence out loud as I'm typing it. I'm like, what word goes here? Then my brain just, it comes up with that word and I put it down. I'm like, okay, but what does that mean? So then I go and I search the word up. I'm like, okay, does this feeling correlate to this word? Part of me believes that that word, I know it's in my vocabulary because I have read it on someone else's work. And if these kids and these middle schoolers or these teenagers going into high school haven't had that opportunity to read these descriptive stories and chapters and, anything, and the descriptive language within them, then they're not expanding their reach in literature and their potential to go beyond what they should, consider themselves to be safe with in their level of reading and writing. If they aren't getting that, then how do they know that they're at their full potential, that they can reach and be solidified with what they've read and what they've written? And I think that is really just a big mystery to me. And so it really is questioning me. It's like, okay, well then how does this tie into my original theory of, because these kids aren't getting involved in creative writing and creative liberties and all these things, are they really expanding their knowledge on topics in English? And that just sat with me for a bit. And I had talked to one of my friends about it, and she was like, you know what? I completely agree with you, because it's the funnel from this website to this website to this, and then you graduate to this, which is the main point. And the high level of items that reach this, and you've seen all of the evolutions of works and grammar, and especially grammar I'm seeing in writing in these websites, in these stories, in these chapters, is yes, you are creating and you're writing your own story with your own thought and people, but your descriptions of these chapters in the story, the grammar is just, there's no capitalization. The punctuation is wrong. You're using the wrong set of yours, theirs, and it's surely we've missed a few steps. The kids who have gone through that tunnel and going through all these different websites, finding out what they like and what attaches them to a piece of literature, a book, a movie, a whatever, script writing, who knows, if they went through that funnel and they're like, okay, well now I've read so many other people's works, I think I have what it takes to finally publish one of my own. And I'm on these free websites and I'm seeing these new updated fics and everything, and the grammar is just not there. The level of writing is not on par. All of these stories have had so many, you can literally go onto more than one website and find stories with over 300 chapters, more than 400,000 words, bigger than the Bible. People are writing fan fiction bigger than the Bible. The concept of reading fan fiction that is longer than the Bible, insane to me. But also, you have to have a lot of patience as well with that. And the characters, the amount of sentences, the paragraphs, the thought that goes into writing that much. And then you turn the page to now, and these new people are writing a take on their own story or a past story or whatever, and they're publishing, and they're like, I feel confident enough to publish this work. And the work is only 700 words. It's like, oh yeah, it's long enough. It's a little blurb. Da-da-da. I hope you enjoy it. And they're like, oh yeah, this is the only one I'm doing. It's a little one shot. No, it's not. That's just a blurb. You want to write? The least you could give me is 1,000. 1,000 words. That's not a lot. 1,000 words, that's not a bunch. I can write 1,000 words really easily now. And all these new fics without the proper grammar and capitalization and the right use of definitions, and they're short, was what concerns me, is that because the implications of COVID, if people are still going through this funnel to these websites, and this is the output that it's giving me, it's we are in a serious drought of literacy. The rate of literacy has severely gone down if this is what the creative mind has come to. Because it kind of baffles me to think that someone's like, oh, I feel accomplished with this 700 and so word fic. And it's yeah, great. I'm so glad that you feel accomplished, and I'm proud that you felt comfortable enough to publish something of your own. And that's great. And that's phenomenal. And you can grow from that. But as a person who spent the entire summer from the end of 8th grade to the end of quarter one going into quarter two of ninth grade year writing a fan fiction that now has 37,000 words and is completed and has, 28 chapters to it, which each chapter is between the words of 900 to 2,500 words per chapter. The dedication requirement to that and that persistence that I instilled in myself to write every other day, every other night. I kept telling myself, I had my Spotify open, I had my Google Doc open, I had my Wattpad open. I was like, okay, you're going to write 1,000 words at least and be content and finish it off. You're going to have multiple scenes. You're going to get emotions from different characters and you're going to put dialogue into this chapter and you're going to get a scene on there and it's going to be at least 1,000 words. And if it's not 1,000 words, you're not going to publish it. And I think that mindset in me of I can at least do 1,000 words, but if it goes over, I'll be proud of myself. The amount of times I reached 1,500 words or 2,000 words, I was really proud of myself because I'm like, okay, I got to a point in this chapter where I was content to move on to the next chapter and continue on to reach the end of the story. The kids nowadays don't get that. They write 500 words, which is literally like a small essay. I write 300 words and that's paragraphs. And they write 500 words and make it a small essay and they're content. I'm like, no. It's not the same. It's because it's really not. And now as I've graduated to a higher level of understanding the concepts of, your thesis writing, with AP Lang and AP Literature and taking those classes and courses, I'm really incorporating what I've learned from reading this fan fiction and reading and creating and finding your own theories with the characters and everything. And all of that, I've taken that and applied it to my classes almost. It's almost like I'm teaching myself from the experiences I've gained to this class, which is teaching me also more things to then I can put them together and have something compatible to use with what I enjoy, which is creative writing and writing these stories for myself and people who enjoy reading the stories I've created. So now with that, I've allowed myself to grow as a reader, grow as a writer, and comprehend all of these topics together. And a one-shot no longer is at least 1,000 words. A one-shot for me is now 5,000 words, 6,000 words, and maybe multiple chapters. I want 3 chapters in something because I want it to have a part. I want it to escalate between these time skips or whatever you want to call it. The story now has at least 15,000 words. And if it's 3 chapters, that's dividing it. That's all these letters and all these parts and these dialogue and everything. And you can incorporate so much more feeling and pull and drive for these characters, for their scenes, what you want them to pull from the story when you have more content to work with. And by content to work with, I mean you have that page. Google Docs, you can have an unlimited amount of Google Docs pages on a document, on a slideshow. There is no end to that. That is infinity. It's like the X coordinate and Y coordinate on Desmos. It's infinity. It goes on forever. So nothing is limiting you to your ability to create this. And these students don't have that drive. They don't have the energy. They aren't finding that anymore. They're just doing it so it can get out of the way and be done. And they don't have the energy. And it kind of hurts in a way for that to be a thing because they no longer have that energy to pump out all this information. And so now you're stuck here and you're reading all of this and you're applauding the authors who publish their content online and you're commenting on their works and you're like, hey, this was such a great piece of work. Publish more. Is there another chapter soon? Come back to this thought and process. Like, I think this happened in your story, and even creating your own theory off of someone else's theory, off of the original work and the content, that is a part of the collections of how we are exchanging the literature between people. Whether it be online, whether it be in person, through text, through analyzing books, poems, you name it, you're still getting that content. And I think that loss of finding this creative outlet between the changes of the end of middle school into high school and then on to it's growing with you as a young adult, and finding that if we don't have that anymore, then how are we really comprehending new ideas and theories and expanding our palette to bring more content in? And the language barriers, people are writing different fan fictions and creative stories in Spanish, in French, in German, in Dutch, in Russian, in Chinese, in Korean, and you're getting all this information, but it's still in the same fandom as what you are related to. So then you have people literally being on these websites who speak English, who are so enthralled with the concept of the work or the idea of this relationship pairing or friendship or what these group of friends get up to in their meantime when the movie is done, that they are literally taking these different language stories and putting them into translate so they can still read them. I think that drive for finding more content and getting more, it's like think of picturing squeezing an orange out. I think that drive of getting the last drop of juice is something that these kids nowadays do not have, and they are just not enthralled with that idea anymore. And I think that pipeline of coming so obsessed with something that you want to write about it constantly, or you want to hear about it, or becoming so obsessed with the fandom is not obtainable anymore because the kids aren't understanding what they're reading. Again, in my last episode, it was the concept of you are learning to read, but then you read to learn. And without having that as a baseline, how are you going to grow your ability to comprehend all of this if you don't have that? And for those students or for those people who want to grow theirs, I think that finding your niche enjoyment online through books, through movies, through shows, through media, through sports, through whatever, and finding the videos, finding the video essays, finding the creative writing stories, finding the poems, finding text chains, made up storylines, all those scenarios that people are creating with these characters and headcanoning that these characters are completing or doing in this made up story of theirs means that they're growing their comprehension of the content. And I think that that's really important. So I think that as someone who enjoys writing the fan fiction, as someone who finds it therapeutic in a way of collecting personal matters of relationships that I've had personally, whether it be friends, whether it be family, whether it be strangers, of finding something that really makes me angry, something that really touches my heartstrings, something that makes me go, oh, how honest can I make this character be to reflect something that had happened to me personally in my story, but still tie it into how this character I perceive. It all ties back into the comprehension of that content. And I guess I'm kind of getting a little emotional about it, but in finding a way personally to write about something with such passion for something that you have experienced in life, even if I write these really drastic, these cringy romances between these two characters that I think really do belong together, or like, what if they never had their happy ending type thing that I write about and nothing else. I want those relationships that I have experienced in life with friendships to carry over into how these characters are feeling. And a part of me is a little butthurt about how these friendships that I've had directly impacted how I wrote a certain scene, or the anger behind someone's character, or the honesty, or the pent up energy, the rage, the tiredness of completing something so common and so repetitive that it needs a change. And all of that is important. I'm kind of like straying from the topic here a bit about COVID and how it impacts the funnel between students and stuff like that. But I'm just so passionate about reading these fan fictions and creating them that I feel like I should not have to justify myself, but I'm finding it hard to share that side of me previously. And now that I've come up with this theory, this idea that students are not, obtaining information and gathering the requirements that they need to succeed through school, and they're finding it elsewhere on these digital media platforms, is that it's really important for me to showcase that, hey, I have this skill that I'm applying into this piece of work that I'm passionate about because I enjoy doing it. And that shouldn't have to be something that someone looks down upon. I'm not sure if that's me just being like insecure about it, but I think I've become a better writer, a better person, because I've grasped these concepts of understanding other people's writing and then transferring them into how I write my stories. And so that you are really gaining an emotional connection and an emotional pull to, wow, this is how this story transpired. How does it kind of relate to me and my relationships and friendships and family in my life? Is there something that I could be doing differently that could impact my life positively, negatively? Neither stays the same. And how come I haven't seen it this way before? Because it took me this long to comprehend that these feelings were embedded in me and that they were then transpired onto a page on a computer. Before I leave this episode, my last little thought and rhetorical question for you. It is important to have your creative outlets, no matter the content, no matter the context or how you're receiving it, whether it be through your phone, through your computer, through a game, through a book, through a blog. As long as you are receiving the content and you are understanding and comprehending it and you can reflect upon it, I think is the main key, is that if you reflect upon it and it enlightens something in you, then it is important. And the kids not knowing or not expanding their comprehension and their vocabulary and all of this, their ability to then comprehend relationships and feelings and emotions is really built upon that fundamental. My question is, no matter the creative media outlet, the comprehension of the text, the feeling, the emotion, all of that combined in the content you're seeing in these outlets, is that important in learning to grow your understanding for contextualization and comprehending language and your feelings and finding ways to evolve your repertoire, if that makes sense? Do you think that it is necessary to have those in order to do it? Or do we think that it's influenced by it, if that makes sense? And I feel like that's a valid question, because if it directly relates to it, that's one thing. But if it's influenced or it's influencing someone's ability to understand all of these items, what's the difference there? I'm gonna leave it there because I feel like this is already long enough. I'm your host, Macy, and I'm sorry for this long rant, but I hope you enjoyed this episode of Rewriting the Foundations. In the next episode, I'm going to be taking a different approach in my podcast. Instead of conversation-like type episode, I'm going to be doing an interview episode with a few of my friends and fellow members of the fanfiction community, as well as people scholastically, and gather their opinions on some of this stuff and items and see what they have to say about it. And so that's going to be next week's episode, and I'm really excited for you to join me for that. So thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure, and I'll see you next episode.